Welcome to this short film concerning logistics and customer value. It's based on Martin Christopher's book, Logistics and Supply Chain Management, 4th edition. Today I will go through chapter number 2, but before doing that, then I will just give a short recap on what we looked at in chapter number 1. So in chapter number 1, we looked at logistics and the competitive advantages that you can gain. And first of all, we saw the mission of logistics management. And as you can see here on this slide, the mission of logistics management is to provide the means whereby customers' service requirements are met at lowest cost. So we were very concerned and oriented around the customer needs. And these needs has changed a good bit over the last decades. And as you can see here on the headline, the product life cycle has become shorter. And in the book it gives a great example, really, where you can see here that the good old VCR machine, it took close to 20 years, going from 400 pounds down to 40, so factor 10. And the same happened to the DVD player in just around 4 to 5 years. So the acceleration whereby products are commoditized is really rapidly going on. So this is of course putting a huge challenge on logistics, but it can also be where you can really gain your competitive advantage if you can really set up your supply chain to give you that competitive advantage. And that is what I hope to get across to you throughout all of these lectures that I'm hosting here on the web. So what can we do? Well, move from internal value chain optimization to end-to-end value chain optimization. Could also be the supply chain. So I'm not too overly concerned about using either the value chain or the supply chain as a measure. Porter here is having his old the value chain, very much internal focus, and that needs to really move on to a network orientated. So as the book quite often says, and also in different other supply chain literature, is that we no longer compete company against company. It is supply chains against supply chains. And a supply chain as a view could maybe be better positioned, as you see here on the slide, as a network, because it is really a spider network of different companies that is working together to really gain this competitive advantage in the marketplace. How to optimize then the end-to-end supply chain? Well, it is rather simple by understanding what generates value for each of your customers. But to do that for each and every single customer is probably a little bit too expensive. And so it probably makes sense to kind of group them into segments and then segment up your supply chain and have multiple supply chains operating up against multiple customer segments. And that's what this chapter is really all about. And remember, as it says here in the top line, that it is for the end customer / consumer. And customer value is generated here, as it says, the perceptions of benefit divided by the total cost of ownership. And he also states that this perception of benefit is a quality time service divided by cost times time, and all of these elements can really be pushed by logistics. So we have a great opportunity inside logistics and supply chain management to really increase the customer value. And as you can see here, we have to be very, very oriented around total cost of ownership. So we have to move away from just looking at the unit cost, but really to understand what is generating true customer value, and then deliver that to each of the segments. And as you can see, it's like an iceberg. The acquisition of the actual unit that you might be buying, it could be very small compared to all the other costs that is around that purchase. and it could be inventory cost, as you see here, training, technical support, and maintenance cost. So there's a whole iceberg underneath the sea there. And then, as I said, it is end-to-end. So this is a classic way of when you're looking at the inventory profile for automotive. When you look at it in the middle there, the factories are very lean orientated. They have just-in-time deliveries coming in. Takt times has shaped down the Kanban levels to bare minimum. But as you see here is that at the distributor end, a very high level of inventory, and at the first tier suppliers, very high level of inventory. I would like to point out though that this is from 2004, so it's rather old data, and they have been working quite hard on the dealership inventory level. So I don't have the newest data on that, by the way, but it is just a way of looking at saying that don't push the cost to either downstream customers or distribution channel partners, or push it upstream to your suppliers, because at the end of the day, all cost will filter straight through the supply chain down to the customer and the end consumer. So it is a matter of optimizing the entire supply chain total cost for the benefit of our customers. And here's the impact of stockouts. Now, we have talked a lot about that the marketplace is becoming much more volatile nowadays. And look at this shopping behavior. I mean, if you don't have the product on the shelf, then the loyalty to brands are just becoming lower and lower, and so the purchase will go to your competition. So there is really a harsh environment out there. So brand loyalty, as I said, is coming down. So we have to design supply chains that can deliver availability. And so the availability supply chains tend to move towards a more agile oriented supply chain. I'm not saying, by the way, that there is not a room for lean supply chains, because there certainly is. But we see a push towards more agile oriented, because availability is becoming so critical. Other ways is also to surround the core product by services, and as you can see down here, there are plenty of scope for logistics to impact the service surrounding a core product. It says delivery lead times and flexibility, ease of doing business, and so forth. So what you can do is also differentiate yourself by surrounding the core product by services. And again, here, as I state, logistics and supply chain management in general can be a huge factor in generating that benefit for the end customer. Now, here is where we are really linking customer value to supply chain strategies. This is a key way of looking at it. I've used it plenty of times, I have to say, where you first identify value segments. What do our customers value? And once you understand your customer value, then how can you translate those requirements into an offer, so a value proposition, and what does it take to succeed in this market? So there's the market winner order qualifiers from Terry Hill, and once you have understood that, then you are able to deliver against those propositions in quite often a segmented supply chain offering. So the likelihood is that in today's marketplace, you will have to operate multiple supply chains simultaneously inside the same company. So it is very likely that you will have to maybe have 3-4 different supply chains offerings to the marketplace based on the different segments that you have classified. So a very central way of looking at the process of going from understanding the marketplace right straight down to a supply chain strategy, and in the end of the day, a supply chain design. Setting customer service priorities and using segmentation to shift the cost of service. So here's another way of looking at it, is the classic ABC classification, or the 80-20. So here you will set different, in this case, maybe stock availability priorities. So you set higher service up against your A products versus your B and C products, because it's probably quite too expensive to hold a really high stock availability on all your product programs. And this curve can be looked at also from how you design your supply chain, maybe having a lean-oriented supply chain strategy for your A products, and then a more agile orientation towards the B and C items. And what this can do is they can shift the curve of serving, so it becomes a little bit less expensive to generate a high service per segment. And what this really is saying is that you can do one of these double ABC, which is also becoming quite known, where you have your ABC classification on your customers, and then you have your ABC classification on your products. And what this is telling us is that based on 4% of the transactions done, the company generates 64% of the profit. So this is really putting it in spotlight that your A customers procuring the A products has to be serviced at an extreme high level, so we don't lose out on the sale as we saw early on by having empty shelves. Those products for those customers really have to be serviced at the top notch. And a way to look at it could be following this simple 2x2 matrix. Different focus, as I said in the headline, and supply chain designs per segment. So you have the product contribution by SKU on the x-axis going from low to high, and then you have the volume. And if you have in the lower left-hand corner, if you have both low contribution margin and low volume, then you should really have a look at maybe reviewing those products, because maybe you shouldn't have them in your product program, unless if they are cross-selling up against some of the strategic products. Then it's probably a good place to go and have a look. And again, my experience is saying that companies are much better at introducing new products than they are phasing out old products. And then if you go one step upwards up to number 1, upper left-hand corner, there you still have low contribution margins, but you have really high volume. And there, of course, you should really look to seek out cost reductions, so you can gain even more profit to the company. And here, of course, lean philosophies are excellent in that regard. So moving over to the right-hand side, up to number 2, high contribution margin and high volume. Of course, that is where you really would like to be. And there you really have to provide this high availability. Recall from the last slide, 4% generates 64%, and that means that sometimes companies design their supply chain by moving inventory quite close to their customers to make sure that there is availability. Going down to the right, lower to number 4, as it says, centralized inventories, and you have still high contribution but relatively low volume. So there it's suggested that you are pooling the inventory in a central location and then use express shipment to really meet up with other products, so you can still manage to deliver a complete order at a time to our customers. So this is a way. There are plenty of other models out there on how to segment up your supply chain, and we will go through that as we move along throughout this book, and also by all the other articles that we will have a look at. So this is just a model. There are plenty. But thank you very much for listening to me, and I will see you next time.